Where do I even begin here? Hello, my name is Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU, and I make my living by showcasing the Legacy format. I have been a sponsored guest at every Magic Con in the United States since those started up. I have worked with most major card retailers at this point, including Star City Games, Cool Stuff Inc., and Tales of Adventure. I was a level 2 Magic judge for a long time. I had my fair share of grinding days on the SCG circuit. I've won plenty of tournaments, mostly with Death and Taxes and Red Prison back in the day. Although my content emphasis has shifted away from competitive tournament play. And people pay me to play Legacy, showcasing cool decks, doing ad reads for their tournaments or for their products that are adjacent to Legacy. I make my living, I pay my mortgage by doing the stuff on this channel. I love Legacy, and I want the best for what is everything going on with Legacy. And I don't think what is happening right now is the best for Legacy or Legacy players or viewers of Legacy. And I don't think it matters too much whether you're a competitive player or a casual player. I think today's B&R update is a really big miss that is going to spiral into even more misses. So I'm going to not get angry. I'm not going to get upset, or at least I'm going to try not to. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to try to swear a lot in this video. I'm going to try to put everything on the line and academically tear apart this B&R update. So that I don't have to interrupt the rest of this video, let me plug my sponsors now. My content is possible because of people like TOAMagic.com. Promo code ThrabenU will save you 5% on your order of Magic cards. If you need something for a Legacy deck, because we probably have a stable format for a while, check them out, use my promo code, save a bit on your order. I've got a Commander deck that I'm finishing out, and I am going to be placing an order for all of those cards probably right after I am done uploading this video. And if you want to see the decks that I'm brewing for Legacy, Commander, whatever formats I'm playing, check out my Moxfield. Moxfield.com is the absolute best place to host your websites, your deck lists online. They rule. I recently realized that if you take an image of a card from a website and drag it into Moxfield, it will just throw that card directly into your deck list, which made my life so much easier in building my most recent Commander deck. Seriously, probably saved me like 20 minutes of typing total. So thanks, Moxfield. You guys are great. And without further ado, let's get this show on the road, because I have a lot to say. Okay, this video is going to be heavily time-stamped, so feel free to jump around if you're interested in particular things. The first thing that I'm going to do is just cover what they said in this B&R update specifically for Legacy. That is going to be my focus today. That's what I care about the most and what I am most knowledgeable about. Because honestly, this was a standard B&R update. The other formats were unimpacted by these changes. So as far as the physical text itself, it begins by looking back at the previous B&R update. When we go back to March, the Legacy format was not super healthy. Sowing Myco Spawn, fetching up Wasteland, and putting a ton of pressure on mana bases really had a stranglehold on the format. And Dimir Reanimator at the time was even better than it was as of right now. And Legacy at that time was relatively narrow. There was a very clear top of the metagame, and it was hard to keep up with the various blue decks and various combo decks of the format while also having to respect Sowing Myco Spawn just absolutely obliterating mana bases at any given time. And they believe that they were successful in their previous B&R update in that capacity. So as we move on to the next paragraph here, they start talking about how Legacy players want to have a deck that can be viable for a long time. And then they start talking about how the most recent Legacy showcase on Magic Online had an extremely diverse top 8, with only a lone copy of Dimir Reanimator which did not win the tournament. It lost in the quarterfinals. It feels like Legacy players have directions to go if they want to be successful without playing Daze and Entomb together. I'm going to come back to this later, but I'm going to read it verbatim. It is hard for us to disentangle if the reason that Dimir is showing up at high rates is because it is the best deck, or if Legacy is delivering on its promise of allowing players to play with the same cards year after year. I have a lot to say there, but this is just what does the thingy say. That's what section we're in right now. And then we start talking about Oops, which gets 3 paragraphs. I'm going to focus here for right now. To some, this deck can be particularly frustrating to lose to, as it feels like it's abusing Magic's game engine more than it is playing a game of Magic. To other people, it's an illustration of why Magic's game engine is cool. Fast forwarding to the next paragraph, for now the deck is showing up at a range that is acceptable for decks in the format, and has a win rate that is within permissible ranges, which has us reluctant to make a change, given the strong reactions some players have to playing against this deck and how hard it can be to adapt to. The bar it has to clear for us to take action against is lower than some other decks, but for now we're happy to let such a unique deck have a place exist within Magic. And ultimately, this leads to no changes within the current Legacy format. So that's the gist of what this says, words on the page. And now we're going to launch into the immediate community reaction to this update. Let's talk about how the community feels about this B&R update. And I want to preface this by saying people in different aspects of their Magic career and people who approach formats in different ways are almost always going to have different takes on what should be banned in a format. The person who plays Legacy once a week at their local game store is going to have a different opinion on the format than someone who is playing a league every single day and who is on the grind and cares only about things like tournament results and win rates. And when managing a format, you have to keep in mind that you are not really managing exactly one group of people who all want to play the game in exactly the same way. So in managing Legacy, you need to make sure that you are creating an environment that is good for the people who are on the grind and who want to play tournaments. And you also want to make sure that you are making a format that is fine for your casual pick up and play players. There are a lot of people back in the SCG days who would have a Legacy deck, and when a tournament was within driving distance, they would go to it and they would have fun. You know, it was a weekend where you could go get a couple of beers with your friends, get some good meals, play a tournament. Whether you scrub out or whether you win, you're going to have a good weekend. And so you want to make sure that you are making your format appealing to a wide variety of people. And not every B&R update needs to hit for everyone, and not every B&R update can be a success for everyone in your player pool. But what is pretty unique about this B&R update is that everybody thinks they fucked up. Just across the board, straight negative tone towards this B&R update within the context of Legacy. Standard players largely are eating good. Their format got fixed. Their format got managed. Legacy players are left going WTF. I'm just going to read a selection of random tweets and posts on ranging from Twitter, Blue Sky, YouTube comments, all that sort of stuff. This is by no means exhaustive, but this should give you a good range for how people are reacting here. And this is a swearing portion of the video because I'm just going to be quoting stuff. I'm going to leave authors off here as I certainly do not have time to hunt down everyone and be like, hey, can I put you in this video? So, no changes. You fucking kidding me? When it comes to Legacy, I've been anti-community panel for a long time. I trusted Wizards to make good decisions for the format I love. Today changed that. I wouldn't even want to be a part of it. I just want individuals who actually give a shit about Legacy. Not exactly optimistic about the lack of bans. Looks like we'll spend the next couple of months playing through a ton of Grave Hate, like a deja vu of 2024. Can I send my therapy bills to Wizards? In regard to a paragraph on Oops All Spells. This is such a fucking insulting thing to say, like actually go fuck yourself. Disrespectful beyond parody. Clicks on the B&R. What do you mean no changes? Are you going to quit Legacy for the season? I'm not sure I have the strength to survive another half year of Oops. I think no bans is very good for a format. Well, not for Legacy, but for the format Legacy players will flock to as a Legacy replacement. Sorry, we're all stuck in the waiting room for the foreseeable future. Man, I don't play Legacy at all, but I love watching it. And Oops All Spells is so miserable to watch someone play and play against that I cannot imagine why it needs to be in the format. WTF Wizards, no bans to Legacy. Spoiler from the future. This announcement is disappointing for every format not called Standard. And I think that is probably enough to get the general idea across, right? There aren't really people out there going, yeah, no, I think this was the correct decision. Normally, in any B&R update, where the format is not just very clearly broken, you will have people out there defending the format. And we don't have that this time around, because for the players who are in there and playing games, regardless of whether you're casual or competitive, it is clear that things are wrong with this format. The community expected something here, and I think we needed something. Was everyone on the same page about what that something should be? Absolutely not. There were people such as myself and the members of my podcast who were calling for an Entomb ban. There were people, such as myself and the members of my podcast, who thought that some chunks of Oops All Spells should probably go. There were some people discussing the banning of other cards, ranging from Tamiyo Inquisitive Student to Orcish Bowmasters to the One Ring to Nadu. And as always, there are always people talking about wanting to ban days. And the problem with getting a B&R update wrong is that we don't get B&R updates when we need them anymore. We get B&R updates on a set schedule, with the next one being in November. And we're going to talk about that specific date in just a minute. In my opinion, it was pretty obvious that Oops All Spells was problematic back in March. It was pretty obvious that Reanimator was problematic back in March. So we have gone through an entire B&R cycle with those things still being true. And now we need to go through another cycle of those things being true, and potentially 2 cycles of that being true. Again, more on that later, but I've got a serious outline going on that I'm going to try to stick to. And the problem here is that when you miss on a B&R update, the result is a stagnant format that does not have much of a chance of changing. One of my biggest problems with Legacy as a whole, and I'm talking about like a 10 or 15 year timeline here now, not any current format in particular. One of my biggest problems with Legacy as a whole is that it sometimes reaches a stage of stagnancy where the invested players very clearly know that something is wrong in the format and is too good to be handled by normal metagame forces and adaptation, but Wizards of the Coast won't act on it. Historically, Wizards of the Coast has not been very willing to touch Legacy with bans, and it tends to get really bad before they are willing to take action. The last couple of years has increased the rate of change of the Legacy format, mostly due to fire design and pushed summer sets. The power level of cards, generally speaking, is not as pushed as it was in those couple of Modern Horizons style summer sets. Some very powerful stuff obviously still does make it through, but card design, I think, has gotten slightly better than some of the pushed multi-format breaking things that we have gotten. But when something slips through the design cracks and is too good, we end up stuck with it for a long time, and it tends to be very format warping. Oko was probably the worst one. when we had Oko and Uro and Astrolabe all at the same time, Legacy was pretty miserable to play. And there were entire things that you just could not even think about doing within the metagame because it was so invalidated. You want to be a Blood Moon gamer? No, you don't. Astrolabe fixes that for 1 mana. You want to play fair creatures and artifacts? No, you don't. Everything is an elk, and all of your cool abilities don't do anything. Your lock pieces are elves, your hate elks, your hate bears are elks, and so on and so forth. And that was a very stagnant and very boring format. And honestly, if I was not a content creator, I really would have thought about quitting Legacy there very, very seriously. It was just not enjoyable to play, and it was not enjoyable for a prolonged period of time. And we have had plenty of periods like that throughout Legacy's history. I know Sensei's Divining Top Miracles is something that a lot of players look back favorably upon, myself included, but it was not healthy. And now we are in the era of blue-black Reanimator, banwave after banwave after banwave after non-banwave, continuing to have its dominance. The metagame forces are not appropriately adapting to it. Can other things be successful? Yes, absolutely. But we're going to look at some of the numbers in a later section. I think Reanimator is much better than Wizards of the Coast's article makes it out to be. So the community reaction, unquestionably, overwhelmingly, was negative towards this B&R update. And now I want to analyze it, dig into the words, dig into what Wizards is actually presenting here, and really talk about why the community is so upset about this one. Because I think their anger and disappointment is very justifiable based on this article. All right, so let's get in on the text of this here. And I'm going to start down here at the end of the first paragraph. And we're going to start by doing Reanimator, and then we'll do Oops All Spells in the next section. So, Dimir Reanimator, on the other hand, has remained the most played deck in the format, albeit at a lower win rate and a smaller share of the metagame. In a lot of ways, this is the process working as intended. I am not actually sure how true it is that it is a smaller share of the metagame. Without pulling up all of the historical data here, currently Combo in Legacy is sitting at a frankly absurd play rate of 55% according to MTG Top 8, and Reanimator is at 20% of the format. If we do MTG Goldfish numbers instead, in the last 30 days, Reanimator is at 19.3% of the format, 19.9 if you look at it in the last 14 days instead, 18.1 if you look at it in the last 7 days. So Reanimator's metagame share is still absurd. Depending on which data set you are looking at, it is probably double to triple the metagame percentage of any other deck, depending on how finely you want to split things here. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit here that Wizards of the Coast has more data than I do. But looking at the data that I have available, crunched by Joe Dyer and the other people from the MTG data, legacy data collection project, Dimir Reanimator in the challenges that we have data for, not counting the mirror matches, is at a 57% win rate, excluding mirrors again. And the bar for bans is often cited at 55%. If you include the mirrors, it is at 56% win rate. And if you do some of the funny statistics things and you look at, hey, what is the win rate of this thing actually accounting for variance? I don't understand the statistics tests enough to go into it, but I think the minimum expected win rate of the deck is 53% given all of that. Wilson's CI minimum for you stats nerds out there, but I don't fully understand that test, so I'm not going to go into it any further than that. So, I don't know that the tail end of this paragraph is actually true. Again, they have more data than I do, but they don't share any of it. But the data that we have publicly that we are able to crunch stands in direct opposition to what is said here. And now I want to go in on this. So, given that the most recent Legacy Showcase on Magic Online had an extremely diverse top 8, with the lone copy of Dimir Reanimator going out in the quarterfinals, it feels like Legacy players have directions to go if they want to be successful without playing Daze and Entomb together. Yeah, but can we actually talk about the deck in question in the B&R section? The data... No, let's not even fucking call it data. It's datum. Singular. One fucking data point. Alright, I swore. I got upset. After months and months and months of content creators and data crushers going, Dimir Reanimator is too good. Reanimator is too good. Here are the results. Here are the results. Here are the results. And weekend after weekend after weekend of seeing events with like 3+ copies of Reanimator, including 5 copies of it in a recent Legacy challenge. They picked the Legacy Showcase Challenge, one single tournament that happened to have one Reanimator finish, to talk about the deck being fine within the context of the format. That is disingenuous. So one of the things you learn as you start to learn anything about statistics and presenting data is that it is very easy to use data to support whatever conclusion you think is likely. And this is an example of cherry picking one singular event to illustrate a very specific point. And this ignores months and months and months of data. And this is very, very frustrating because people work incredibly hard to get the limited data that we do have for Legacy. In case you don't know, it involves manually going in and like watching replays of Magic Online matches to see what people were playing, and manually generating spreadsheets of what decks people are on. And beyond that, also like generating, okay, where is the line between Is It Delver and Grixis Delver and Rug Delver and other similar archetypes and things like that. And instead of getting anything about data, win rates, we instead get zeroed in on one specific tournament, and it goes, yeah, format looks healthy, there's the checkbox, we're going to move on to talking about the next thing. And this is incredibly frustrating as someone whose life is linked to Legacy. Let's move on to the next thing here. I guess quickly, there are other things that you can do in Legacy that are not Dimir Reanimator. There are other Dimir decks that exist within the format, for example, that are relatively good. There's sort of a Dimir tempo control deck that has a lot of overlap with the Legacy Reanimator deck. You can be doing other Daze-based things in the format if you want to. All right. It is hard for us to disentangle if the reason that Dimir is showing up at a high rate is because it is the best deck, or if Legacy is delivering on its promise of allowing players to play with the same cards year after year. You have the data! You have the data. You get to look at that. You get to see. The rest of us don't. I feel like it is the job of Wizards of the Coast to manage their formats. And if your conclusion to a major section is, we don't understand why this is or is not happening, fucking ask someone who understands. I beg you, I beseech you, reach out to people who understand the format. Because I think if you are in the trenches playing any reasonable amount of Legacy, I think it is quite clear that people aren't changing decks. People love playing Delver. People love playing dirtily blue control decks. But normally, when a metagame is healthy, there is a rotation of what you are doing. And instead, it's, no, blue-black Reanimator is just really fucking good. We don't need to innovate into other decks. We just need to make sure that we are tuned for the mirror and that we are in touch with how we should be sideboarding at any given point. Because there are weeks where it might be correct to board out the Reanimator package. There are weeks where always keeping it in every single matchup is going to be correct. The adjustment is, what do you do with blue-black Reanimator, not what deck do I play. Whew. Okay, so Let's talk about Oops All Spells now. I am very frustrated with this section, and I'm going to go back to a previous B&R update as well in talking about this, because I feel like part of what is written here, with some slightly different text around it, could be going into an article about why this is supposed to be banned. Oops All Spells is incredibly frustrating to play against for a number of reasons. Number one, it is very easy for it to be a turn one combo deck with protected wins. And in game one, decks don't tend to have the degree of hate necessary, or the narrowness of the hate that is required is so specific that it wouldn't make sense to put into the deck in game one. I think your Leyline of the Void type cards. So it's a deck that often gets to free roll game ones. And the deck requires very specific graveyard hate to beat it. Playing graveyard hate isn't enough, you have to play the ones that specifically can potentially beat it. But the deck can totally just ignore your graveyard hate and win with things like Goblin Charbelcher, and many of the generic graveyard hate cards that you might want to be doing just get beat by cards like Memory's Journey and Jack-O-Lantern. So not only do you need graveyard hate to beat this deck, it needs to be specific graveyard hate, and then when you do have that specific graveyard hate, it is often not good enough because of the juke plans that get involved. And again, sometimes it's Goblin Charbelcher, sometimes it is just creatures with a large amount of power and toughness, your Barragoyfs, your Rotting Regisaurs, things of that general nature. But it is a deck that has free interaction, can win on turn one, and can invalidate the sideboard attempts you have at beating it. So if you are not specifically playing, say, a Leyline of the Void Force of Will deck, it becomes very, very difficult for you to have decent game against this deck. And they're right. It is frustrating to lose to. They've got it. Is it frustrating because they're abusing the Magic game engine? Sure, I guess you could say that. They did say that. But I think it is frustrating to lose to because your efforts to beat the deck often are not sufficient. Especially if you are playing a fair non-blue deck, you just don't have the fucking tools to keep up with this deck. You cannot beat their primary game plan in game one, and if you beat their primary game plan in game two, the tertiary and secondary game plans are still good enough. Not only do you have to stop them from comboing off on turn one, you then have to stop them from charbelching you, and then you also have to stop them from just beating you down with embarrassing creatures, and that is a lot to do at the same time. I am very angry at this. Oops All Spells does not reward you for having a deep knowledge of the rules and cards in Magic. This is not a literal thoughtless deck, but the deck does largely play itself. You cast one spell, and it wins the game. Are there times where you have a decent degree of agency and you can play around things using an appropriate Cabal therapy or sequence to kind of optimize your chances of success? Yes, absolutely. But this deck does largely boil down to cast your Spy or your Undercity Informer and win the game. This is not rewarding a deep knowledge of the rules. This is not you going, okay, I'm going to place 3 triggers on the stack. Okay, these are placed active player first and then non-active player. The non-active players is going to resolve first, or I need to activate this. I'm going to hold priority, and then I'm going to do a second action while also holding priority, and I'm going to keep one thing on the stack so my opponent does not have the chance to cast their sorcery spell. That is going to be very important. There is not a nuanced degree of rules knowledge going on here. There just isn't. I think the average ponder rewards your knowledge of the game more than most of the things in Oops All Spells. Because a ponder requires you to look at 3 cards, put them back in the correct order, or decide if you are going to shuffle. When you throw a fetch land into the mix, that is another degree of decisions about, do I want one of these cards? Do I want 2 of these cards? Do I want all of these cards? When do I fetch? There's a lot going on there. And I don't feel like most of that is happening here with Oops All Spells. And they are put into the difficult position of trying to arbitrate whether or not we think Oops All Spells has a positive or negative impact on the format. It sucks to play against. It sucks to watch. And, in my opinion, it's not particularly fun to play with either. It is just a good deck that is good at beating stuff. And they talk about how they run the risk of killing the deck completely. I do not think that is a bad thing. There are so many combo decks that exist in the format that are, in my opinion, so much more interesting than Oops All Spells. Let's use Doomsday as an example. Doomsday is another deck that can cast its namesake card on turn 1 and potentially win the game. But that will more frequently happen on turn 2. But here's the thing about Doomsday. You're all in once that happens. You don't get the backup plan once you Doomsday, right? Like, you Doomsday, you cast that. Maybe you build a pile that can cast 2 different Thassa's Oracles in case one of them gets countered or something like that. But Doomsday is an incredibly skill-testing card. Holy shit, that card is so interesting. Like, you have to build the pile that maybe has to be a Blood Moon, and a Chalice of the Void, and a Red Elemental Blast at the same time. Or you have to decide, okay, do I want to wait an extra turn to do this Cavern of Souls, but then maybe this is going to open me up to a Wasteland or a discard spell instead? And I think that is incredibly interesting. And there have been a lot of times where my opponent has built a Doomsday pile where I'm like, okay, this is the way that I think I thread this needle. And I think Doomsday rewards you greatly for having deep knowledge of the format. I think Stormlines are very interesting. Yes, sometimes it is a deterministic Beseech the Mirror line that is relatively straightforward. Okay, I'm going to cast a bunch of things, I'm going to cast them from my graveyard again, and Tendrils, and there we go. But then what about the games where your opponent is at 30 life, and now you have to go through a larger number? We have seen plenty of times on my channel where a Storm opponent has started comboing off and then paused for a long time as they go, oh no, I am a Storm short here of lethal since my opponent gained some life. Can I get myself out of this? And I think Storm rewards the pilots who have specialized in that deck and have deep knowledge of what they need to play around, and whether or not they can afford to wait another turn, whether they can take another hit from those creatures. And I think this is a time where if they are looking at win rates only, that is a mistake. And I want to go back to the Sowing Mycospawn ban that existed previously. That was not a ban that was done based purely on numbers. That was a ban that happened because of vibes. Sowing Mycospawn was banned because playing against it was miserable, and it was putting a ton of pressure on the metagame. Oops All Spells is doing the exact same thing. It is miserable to play against, and it is putting a ton of pressure on the format. You can't play the Graveyard Hate that is going to be best versus blue-black Reanimator specifically, because your Graveyard Hate basically needs to be Leyline of the Void or bust, because most of your Graveyard Hate is not viable unless it is Leyline of the Void, especially in non-blue decks. And I don't understand how we can sit here saying the bar is low for us to take action against this deck and not take action against it. Because we have been talking about this deck for 2 B&R updates now, which means if we were talking about it in the last update, it was already a problem prior to that, right? So we are just kind of sitting here waiting, and both of the decks that we are talking about today, Blue-Black Reanimator and Oops All Spells, exist in the same overall space. That is a graveyard-oriented combo deck that is difficult to fight against. When playing, I'm going to make myself big here now. All right. So when playing against Blue-Black Reanimator, you have to simultaneously respect a turn 2 combo deck and a deck that can just outgrind you and outvalue you. When playing against Oops All Spells, you have to respect a turn 1 combo deck that could not only use the graveyard, but also could kill you with Goblin Charbelcher, and they could get rid of your Graveyard Hate or ignore it completely with sideboard jukes. And the stuff that is at the top of the format overall is the stuff that we can't really handle dealing with because its resiliency is too high. and we are just having no action taken on both of them at the same time, which is very frustrating. All right, so a lot of people in talking about ban discourse are very, very eager to just go, oh, you're always whining about banning. All legacy players do is whine about bans. And I want to say that I am the first person to praise Wizards of the Coast when I think they do something right. I work with Wizards of the Coast officially in a business capacity. I have been an ambassador for multiple of their sets. I have previewed cards. I do PR work for them at Magic Cons where I have meet and greets. I have a professional working relationship with Wizards of the Coast. And when they do something good, I will say, great job, Wizards. This was awesome. And even if I don't get exactly the bans that I think should happen, if any action were taken today, literally any action were taken today, I would be excited. I would be recording matches immediately as I got done recording this, B&R reaction video. But I think this is a time where we need Wizards of the Coast to, loudly and clearly hear the message. You fucked up on this one. You missed it. This is not what we as players want for the format. And again, not everyone is going to be on exactly the same page for what they want for their specific version of Legacy that they are going to enjoy. But it is very clear that no changes to Legacy was the wrong objective call. And I expect that we are now going to start seeing calls for a Legacy community panel, which is something that comes up from time to time. And I am very, very strongly against this. I think that people look at Pauper and go, hey, this format is super healthy. Hey, this format is getting very nice data-driven decisions with community sentiment being valued. And people go, hey, I want that for Legacy too. But I would like to remind you that the members of that panel regularly get harassed. And remember, Pauper is a format of commons. Your deck does not cost much. Whereas Legacy is a deck where individual cards can be worth multiple thousands of dollars in some cases. And as soon as faces in the community can be pointed to and people go, it's that person's fault that I lost a couple $1,000s, I think very, very bad things would happen. So I am still opposed to a community format panel, despite the fact that I would love to see more management decisions that were good. I don't want to receive death threats, I think is what it boils down to. I am very much the sort of person that would be selected for a panel like that. And I deleted a comment on a YouTube video that I produced the other day. That was somebody talking about wanting to stick objects violently into orifices. That just give you an idea. That is the sort of thing that shows up on YouTube comments from time to time when you are a content creator. People will send you messages about, go kill yourself. I'm going to do bad things to you. I know where you live. You get things like that from time to time. And as soon as you put that person into an official position of power, I think there is a very real chance for things to actually happen to people, or at least to receive those threats and messages of harassment. And I am not interested in that. And I am not interested in putting that fate upon other people. Welcome to the darker side of content creation, by the way, folks. Buckle up. It gets weird sometimes. Okay. If you thought things were bad so far, they're about to get worse, unfortunately. So, the next B&R update is November 24th. It's June, July, August, September, October, November. The next B&R update is five months away this time. Nearly half a year. And Wizards of the Coast has stated that they are trying not to do any sort of bans outside of these B&R update windows. Which makes sense for some formats that aren't Legacy, but is kind of dumb for Legacy, which is not tied to Pro Tour invites or any major tournament circuit or anything of that nature. So, we're stuck with Oops and Reanimator for 5 months. But it is worse than that, because Wizards of the Coast will not act on Legacy in the next B&R update window. Well, why am I saying that? Because it is immediately before one of the Eternal Weekend events. I'll make sure I get these numbers right here. So, the American Eternal Weekend event is October 9th through 12th. The Italian one is November 27th through 30th, and the Japanese one is December 13th to 14th. So, guess what? Is Wizards of the Coast going to make changes to the B&R list or Legacy 3 days prior to one of the largest tournaments of the year? No fucking chance. And they essentially say as much in the Pauper update. We don't want to make a change that close to Eternal Weekend in Europe, where there will be a lot of Pauper being played. So if we apply that same logic to Legacy, that means that we're not getting Legacy changes for the next B&R update. So we're stuck with this shit. Like, this is just what our format looks like. And the current B&R cadence is such that when Wizards of the Coast makes a mistake, we're stuck with it. And because they are unwilling to make major changes before big tournaments, we're stuck with a bad mistake, not just for this B&R cycle, but for the next one as well. So, like, this is just what Legacy looks like. And there is no hope of changes. And that sucks. That really fucking sucks. A B&R update should generate excitement. When I think about a successful B&R update, I really look back to the modern unbanning one, where a lot of things like Splinter Twin got freed. That generated so much excitement and hype in the format. And I don't think you need to ban things in every single B&R update window. I really don't. I think there are going to be many times where a format is healthy, or times where a format is in a reasonable, let's keep an eye on this for one more cycle. But I don't think you get to be light-handed in making changes to a format that is established as having problems if you are unwilling to make changes outside of the cycle and you are unwilling to make changes prior to major tournaments. I'm going to give you a look behind the curtain here. I had set set aside huge amounts of time in this week to record post-ban Legacy content. Like, I had intentionally let my buffer get low so that I could get people the content that they were going to be excited about. Well, now, not only do I get to make content, not make content that people are excited about with a fresh new format, but also, as a business decision, my decision to do that now means that I am behind on my workload. And that sucks. I am trying to make reasonable business decisions based around what I anticipate Wizards of the Coast is going to do. And the do something today was certainly on the radar of what I expected, even if it wasn't fully what I wanted, right? And I was just wrong. And it is hard to run a business around producing Legacy content if I can't get Wizards of the Coast to do their portion of it and manage their formats. I think the bar was very low today. You ban Entomb. You ban a piece from Oops. You unban a card. I think you could do literally anything, mix up the format the tiniest bit, and it gets excited. And people are hyped to watch your content. People are hyped to record your content. People are hyped to get into their local game store, play some games of Legacy, see what the new format is going to look like. And instead, we are going to get more of the same that we have had for, I don't know, how long has this Reanimator stuff been going on in its current iteration? A year? And we are just looking forward to another year of that. I feel like, it's Groundhog Day. Puxatani Phil came out of his little hiding hole and was like, yep, 6 more months of Reanimator. Maybe a full-on more year of this. So obviously I am frustrated on this one. And I think most of the Legacy community, at least those who are making their voices known public in some online space, are also frustrated by this. I'm going to give a couple pieces of advice moving forward here. Number one, don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the person who was tasked with writing this article on this one. I think any ire needs to be directed at the entity that is Wizards of the Coast, not one individual here. She does not deserve that. Be productive if you can. This video is not, Wizards of the Coast is ruining Magic. How could they do this to us? Fuck Wizards of the Coast. I am trying to be academic about this, and I want what is best for Legacy. I love Magic, right? Like this is my career. I want to play Magic. I want to make interesting and engaging content. I want people to look forward to my video for their lunch hour or to fall asleep to or whatever. But when we have kind of a stagnant, largely solved format, there aren't as many gears to turn and twist. And there are fewer things that are actually viable within the format, which is less interesting to me. So when you can, direct your energy in a productive way. Throw out your tweets, tag your people that you want to tag. But at the end of the day, it is unclear how much Wizards of the Coast is actually listening to community members. I know many of you have, tinfoil hats. Oh, the Eternal Glory podcast controls the Legacy banned list. Illuminati are involved too. Clearly not, right? Like, very, very clearly not true. And I will say, if you're not enjoying Legacy, there is absolutely nothing wrong with not playing Legacy or taking a break from Magic until things change and get you to a better place. I don't necessarily think it is the healthiest thing to just continue to do something that you are not enjoying. So if you realize, hey, current Legacy is not for me, maybe tune out until the next set releases. Maybe tune out until November or next March, whatever it ends up being. I would get it. And I don't want to be giving that advice because I think Legacy is a super cool format. The interactions are intricate. The stack battles are cool. Fighting through oppressive stacks pieces is an interesting puzzle to present to people. Trying to adapt to a cyclical metagame. I am into that sort of stuff. The current Legacy is a lot less interesting than other Legacy formats that have existed in the past, and that is rather unfortunate. And I think we are going to see a lot of the same on the channel in the next couple of months. And that is very, very sad to say. And I think a lot of new things that maybe could get injected into Legacy are going to be pushed to the side by the current Oops All Spells and Blue-Black Reanimator decks, and to a lesser extent Blue-Black Tempo decks that are at the top of the format. And I think entire swaths of Legacy are just not going to be viable. Barrogoyf in particular makes it very, very hard to play a fair red deck, for example, because it is just going to be outside of red removal like Lightning Bolt and Fury, and the lifelink undoes a substantial amount of early aggressive damage. One way or another, I'm going to be here. I'm going to try to produce the best videos that I can produce, showcasing my love of Legacy and showcasing this awesome format that I think could be a little bit better with like this much more management. However, I will say that what I play on this channel is ultimately up to you all, the viewers. So vote with your eyeballs. Tell me what you want to see on this channel. For those of you in a decent financial position, if you want to see me play some other format other than Legacy, I am more open to that idea for the next couple of months than I otherwise might be. And as kind of a final thought here, I'm gonna take a day off. That's not something I normally do, as this is, my job. This is how I pay my bills. But I had prepared this week to burn the candle at both ends to record with this new and exciting format, and that absolutely is not what is happening here. And the idea of playing the same format for the next 5 to, 10 months is not the most exciting to me. So I'm going to take Friday, July 4th off from producing content, and post-ban content will start on Monday, July 7th normally. With that, I'm going to call it a day. I hope this was useful. I hope this did not come off as the rant of a madman, but as the loving, caring advice of someone who is deeply invested in this format and cares about it deeply. Throw me your thoughts in the comments below. Really would appreciate it on this video in particular, as getting the viewpoints of the people who are casual players and who might just be watching Legacy casually, who might be playing once or twice a week, is really important to me because those people often aren't quite as loud online. With that, I'm going to call it a day here. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of the day. And I hope you can find something fun to do in Legacy over the next couple of months. See ya!